In the quiet town of Maplewood, life was generally peaceful. My wife, Sheriff Jessica, had dedicated years to law enforcement, earning respect and admiration from the community. Little did the local homeowners association, HOA, know that their recent complaints about our property would spark an unexpected and humorous chain of events. The trouble started when we decided to let our front yard get a little wild. Jess had a passion for gardening, but we also enjoyed the charm of wildflowers and natural plants. The HOA, notorious for its strict regulations, saw our yard as an eyesore. After sending multiple warning letters about overgrown foliage, they finally decided to take matters into their own hands. One sunny afternoon, while Jess was at the station, I received an urgent knock on the door. To my surprise, 2 police officers stood there looking serious. They explained that the HOA had reported our property, claiming it violated community standards. I stifled a laugh, knowing full well that the person they were after was actually the sheriff herself. Deciding to have a little fun, I invited the officers in for coffee while waiting for Jessica to return. They were surprised by the warm atmosphere of our home, filled with photos of Jess in her uniform, awards she had received, and a collection of funny sheriff-themed memorabilia. When Jess arrived, the look on the officers' faces was priceless. They stood up, saluting her instinctively, registering the situation only after seeing her uniform. "What seems to be the problem, gentlemen?" she asked with a knowing smile. The officers explained the HOA's complaints, visibly embarrassed as they realized who they were dealing with. Instead of getting upset, Jess laughed it off and assured them that our yard would be taken care of. After a few playful exchanges, Jess invited them to tour our backyard, where she showcased her plans for a beautiful garden. What started as an HOA complaint turned into a lesson in community spirit. Jessica's charm won over the officers, who left with the knowledge that the sheriff was on the case. Later that week, we received a formal apology from the HOA and a new offer to help with gardening resources. The incident became a cherished story within our community, reminding everyone that sometimes misunderstandings lead to unexpected connections. As for the HOA, they learned to think twice before sending the cops after my wife. The scent of freshly cut grass usually meant peace in the pristine community of Eagle Creek Estates. But today it smelled like impending bureaucratic doom. Mark McMillan, a simple software engineer who prized comfort over conformity, was on his knees weeding his front flower bed. The offending item wasn't a weed, but a riotous patch of deep purple petunias, a beautiful accident of gardening. His wife, Jane McMillan, was currently the undisputed county sheriff, but at home, she was just Jane, a woman who liked her coffee strong and her roses red. Today, she was sitting on the porch sipping tea, wearing a worn Police Academy sweatshirt and sweatpants. Mac watched as a gleaming, white golf cart, the official vehicle of the Eagle Creek Homeowners Association, HOA, pulled up, driven by the community's self-appointed warden. "Mr. Vernon Hicks, McMillan," Hicks called out, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I see you received the warning about the atypical color infraction." Mac sighed, wiping dirt on his jeans. "Mr. Hicks, they're petunias. They're purple. The bylaw says no neon colors. Purple is not neon. Chapter 4, Section 3, Subsection B, Line 12, clearly states, no plantings shall possess a color deemed to clash with the approved neutral palette of the community architecture." Hicks adjusted his monogrammed polo shirt. "Those violations clash." He gestured dramatically at the petunias. "Look, I'll move them next week," Mac conceded, wanting to end the debate. "Unacceptable," Hicks sniffed. "This community has standards. The HOA board voted unanimously this morning. Failure to comply immediately will result in further disciplinary action. Consider this your final verbal warning." Hicks sped off in his golf cart, leaving a faint cloud of self-importance in his wake. Jane, the sheriff, took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea and muttered, "I hate that man." Chapter 2. Escalation. Mac went inside to finish a work call, leaving Jane on the porch. 20 minutes later, Jane heard the unmistakable sound of a police cruiser idling nearby. She was used to it, it was her job, but then The cruiser pulled directly into their driveway. A young officer, Officer Miller, whom Jane vaguely recognized from the county academy, stepped out of the patrol car. Trailing him was Mr. Hicks, looking smug, holding a laminated clipboard. "Officer, there he is." "That's the scofflaw," Hicks declared, pointing at Mac's house. "He has repeatedly ignored the HOA's directives and is now obstructing the execution of community standards." Officer Miller looked confused. "Sir, I'm just here to escort the HOA contractor to resolve a complaint regarding exterior property maintenance." "I am the contractor," Hicks announced, revealing a small, battery-powered weed whacker hidden behind his back. "Officer, I need you to stand by in case of belligerence. I'm moving in to correct the aesthetic violation." Jane stood up. She was still wearing the comfy sweats, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She stepped off the porch and stood directly in front of the petunias. "Gentlemen," Jane said, her voice dropping into the low, authoritative register she reserved for processing violent offenders. "What exactly is happening here?" Hicks didn't even look at her. "Stay out of this, madam. This is a matter between the HOA and the homeowner, Mr. McMillan, and frankly, your attire is also a breach of the Respectable Appearance Guideline." Chapter 3. The badge officer Miller, looking increasingly uncomfortable, finally spoke. "Ma'am, please step aside. We are just ensuring a peaceful outcome here." "A peaceful outcome," Jane repeated flatly. "By sending a county car to facilitate the vandalism of my property based on a complaint about purple flowers?" Hicks chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. "You're lucky we didn't send a real problem your way, like the code enforcement team. Now move it before I have this officer charge you with obstructing a—" Before Hicks could finish, Jane reached into the pocket of her police academy sweatshirt, pulled out her gold sheriff's badge, and held it up in the sunlight. It was official, gleaming, and unmistakably the highest law enforcement authority in the county. The effect was instantaneous and stunning. Hicks's jaw literally dropped, causing his laminated clipboard to slip from his sweaty grasp and hit the pavement with a soft thud. Officer Miller, pale with shock, immediately snapped to a parade rest posture, saluting sharply. "Sheriff McMillan, my apologies, ma'am. I didn't recognize you out of uniform." Jane fixed Miller with a stare that could melt steel. "That's fine, officer. But tell me, why are you on duty in a county vehicle accompanying a private citizen on a private civil dispute over petunias?" "Sir, I was told this was a crucial community disturbance requiring a police presence," Miller stammered, his eyes darting to the quivering Mr. Hicks. Chapter 4. Resolution. Jane turned her full attention to Vernon Hicks. Hicks, who moments ago was a titan of tedious tyranny, now looked like a frightened garden gnome. "Mr. Hicks," Jane said calmly, "you used county resources, namely Officer Miller and a patrol car, under false pretenses to intimidate a property owner during a private civil dispute. That is a serious matter. It's called misuse of government property and public resources, among other things." Hicks tried to find his voice. "But the bylaws," Jane interrupted, her voice gaining volume, "do not supersede the law. You are not the police. You have zero authority to summon a police officer for a flower-related matter." She turned to Officer Miller. "Officer, you are dismissed. You are to report to the station immediately to file a full report on the context of this call." "Yes, ma'am," Miller said, scrambling into his car and speeding away with an urgency that suggested he would be doing push-ups for the rest of the day. Jane watched the patrol car vanish before looking back at the petunias, then at Hicks, who was rooted to the spot. "Mr. Hicks," Jane concluded, picking up the fallen clipboard and handing it back to him. "The petunias stay. Furthermore, I suggest you go back to your board and review all your bylaws in accordance with state property rights laws. And if a single blade of grass on my lawn is disturbed, you will not be dealing with the homeowner." She tapped her gold badge with one finger. "You will be dealing with the county sheriff." Jane smiled, a cold, official smile, and walked back to her porch to finish her tea. Hicks, defeated and sweating profusely, slowly backed up, dropped his tiny weed whacker, and bolted back to the safety of the HOA office, never to look at a purple flower the same way again. When we moved into our new neighborhood, Everything seemed perfect. Quiet streets, friendly faces, and a fancy HOA that promised order and beauty. But soon, that order turned into harassment. It started small. Notes about our grass being half an inch too long, complaints about our truck in the driveway, and warnings about improper trash placement. My wife, Sarah, stayed calm every time. What they didn't know was that Sarah is the county sheriff. One morning, while I was fixing the mailbox, 3 HOA board members marched up, waving papers, yelling about code violations. They even said, "If you don't comply, we'll call the cops." Sarah smiled and said, "Go ahead." An hour later, 2 police cruisers pulled up. But as soon as the officers saw her, it was a quiet Saturday morning in Oak Ridge Estates, the kind of gated-ix of neighborhood where the grass is always 2 inches exact and every mailbox matches. I was sipping coffee on the porch when Karen from the HOA rolled up in her white Escalade. Clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Mr. Thompson!" she barked. "Your wife parked her truck in the guest spot again. That's the 3rd violation this month." Rules are rules. The truck in question was my wife's unmarked black Tahoe, county-issued, lights hidden in the grill, the whole deal. Sarah wasn't just any wife. She was Sheriff Sarah Thompson, elected last year with 68% of the vote. But Karen didn't know that. Nobody in the HOA did. We'd kept it quiet on purpose. Sarah walked out in sweatpants and an old Academy t-shirt, hair in a messy bun, holding our toddler on her hip. She looked like any exhausted mom, not the woman who'd taken down 2 meth labs before breakfast last week. "Ma'am," Karen snapped, "this is your final warning. I've already called the police." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You called the police on me? Non-resident vehicle, overnight parking, unauthorized tin on the windows?" Karen rattled off like she was reading charges. "Officer Ramirez is on his way." I tried not to laugh. Ramirez was Sarah's deputy. He'd been at our barbecue 2 weeks ago, eating my ribs and calling Sarah boss. 3 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. Ramirez stepped out, saw Sarah, and froze. His face went through 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, horror, then barely contained laughter. "Sheriff Thompson," he said, tipping his hat. "Ma'am," Karen's clipboard slipped an inch. "Excuse me?" Sarah shifted our son to her other hip. "Deputy Ramirez? You get the call about a dangerous criminal in a black Tahoe?" Ramirez cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. Reported by..." He glanced at Karen. "A very concerned citizen." Karen was turning red. "This is outrageous. She can't just..." Sarah pulled her badge from her pocket, the gold star glinting in the sunlight, and clipped it to her waistband. "Actually, Karen, I can. And this non-resident vehicle is county property, exempt from HOA rules under State Code 42.56b. The silence was glorious. A sprinkler clicked somewhere. A dog barked 3 houses down. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't know." "Now you do," Sarah said sweetly. "Next time you want to report a violation, maybe check who you're reporting first." Ramirez was biting his lip so hard I thought he'd draw blood. "Anything else I can do for you, Sheriff?" "Yeah," Sarah said, handing him our squirming toddler. "Hold my kid while I get my coffee." Karen hasn't sent a single email since. The guest spot? Still occupied by the Tahoe. Windows still tinted. Some battles you don't need to fight when you're the one who writes the laws.